My name is Lupe Martinez, and at 32, I thought my job as a procurement analyst at Apex Technologies meant something. I believed in meritocracy, fairness, and doing the right thing. Then I saw the VP's son get a Rolex for my work, while I got an $11 lunch voucher. What I uncovered next shook the entire company and exposed a $357 million fraud that went straight to the top. Before I dive into how this all unfolded, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. Hit that like and subscribe button and prepare yourself for a story about standing up against corporate corruption. I never planned to become a whistleblower. 5 years ago, I was just another ambitious young professional searching for a company that aligned with my values. After graduating with my master's degree in business administration with a focus on supply chain management, I spent 3 years at a smaller tech firm learning the ropes of procurement. I developed a reputation for attention to detail and an almost obsessive ability to spot inefficiencies in vendor contracts. That's when Apex Technologies noticed me. Apex was the dream. A Fortune 500 company with government contracts, cutting-edge technology, and a reputation for ethical business practices. At least, that's what they wanted everyone to believe. Their recruitment materials featured diverse faces, testimonials about work-life balance, and promises of advancement based on merit alone. When they offered me a position as a senior procurement analyst with a salary that doubled what I was making, I accepted immediately. My first day at Apex headquarters in downtown Seattle was everything I'd imagined. The gleaming 50-story building, the security badges, the open-concept workspace with ergonomic chairs and standing desks. My supervisor, Amanda Nelson, greeted me warmly and introduced me to the team. She was a polished woman in her 40s, with a pragmatic approach to management. "We're lucky to have you, Lupe," she said as she showed me around. "Your reputation precedes you." Over the next few weeks, I met the other key players. Marcus Reynolds, the chief financial officer, was a tall man with salt and pepper hair and custom-tailored suits who projected confidence and authority. He had an MBA from Harvard and a track record of keeping Apex financially sound. In our first meeting, he emphasized how important the procurement team was to maintaining the company's profit margins. "You're the gatekeepers," he said during an orientation for new hires. "Every dollar saved in procurement goes straight to our bottom line." Then there was Bradley Wilson, the son of Executive Vice President Thomas Wilson. Bradley was 26, fresh out of business school, and somehow already in a director position despite his lack of experience. He had his father's strong jaw and his mother's blue eyes, but none of the business acumen that should have come with his title. In our first interaction, he confused basic procurement terms and seemed more interested in talking about his weekend sailing trip than understanding our vendor management strategy. James Parker, the company lawyer, was a quiet presence in most meetings. He took meticulous notes and rarely spoke, unless there was a potential legal issue. His thinning hair and perpetual frown gave him the appearance of someone constantly worried, which, as I would later learn, was completely justified given what was happening behind the scenes. The one bright spot in those early days was Sofia Garcia, another procurement analyst who quickly became my friend and ally. She had been at Apex for 2 years and knew the ins and outs of the company culture. "This place has potential," she told me over coffee during our first week together, "but you have to navigate the politics." I spent my first 3 months learning the systems, reviewing our major vendor contracts, and identifying potential areas for improvement. I discovered that our primary technology supplier, Global Tech Solutions, was charging us significantly more than market rates for similar products. When I brought this to Amanda's attention, she seemed genuinely interested and encouraged me to dig deeper. "This is exactly why we hired you, Lupe," she said. "Fresh eyes can spot things we've overlooked." My analysis suggested we could save nearly $12 million annually by renegotiating with Global Tech or finding alternative suppliers. I put together a comprehensive presentation, complete with market comparisons, projected savings, and implementation timelines. Amanda reviewed it and seemed impressed, scheduling a meeting with Marcus and the broader finance team. The presentation went well. Marcus asked insightful questions about my methodology and seemed particularly interested in the potential savings. "This is excellent work, Lupe," he said as the meeting concluded. "Let me review this with the executive team, and we'll circle back." Bradley was also in that meeting, though he spent most of it checking his phone. At one point, he looked up and asked, "But Global Tech has been our partner for years. Wouldn't changing suppliers be risky?" I explained that my proposal included a risk assessment and transition plan that would minimize disruption, but he seemed uninterested in the details. Despite Bradley's indifference, I left that meeting feeling hopeful. I had made a tangible contribution, identified significant savings, and received positive feedback from the CFO himself. I believed I was making a difference, and that my work was valued. Sophia congratulated me afterward. "That was impressive," she said. "Not many people get that kind of reaction from Marcus in their first few months." My parents, both immigrants from Mexico who had worked multiple jobs to put me through college, were proud when I called to tell them about my early success. My mother, Elena, always reminded me to stay humble and work hard, while my father, Alejandro, encouraged me to stand up for myself and demand recognition for my contributions. Little did I know that these early victories were setting the stage for the shocking disparities and corruption I would uncover in the months to come. The promising beginning was just the calm before the storm, and the meritocracy I believed in was about to reveal itself as an elaborate facade. The annual Excellence Award ceremony was held 6 months after I joined Apex. It was a lavish affair at the Grand Hyatt downtown, with open bars, gourmet food stations, and even a small orchestra. Employees from all departments gathered in their finest attire to celebrate the year's achievements and recognize top performers. I wore a navy blue dress I had splurged on, specifically for the occasion, hopeful that my procurement analysis work might receive some acknowledgement. Marcus Reynolds took the stage as the evening's host, looking immaculate in a tuxedo that probably cost more than my monthly rent. At Apex, we believe in recognizing exceptional talent and contributions, he announced to enthusiastic applause. Tonight is about celebrating the individuals who embody our core values and drive our success. The awards began with recognition for sales achievements, technical innovations, and customer service excellence. Then came the procurement and finance categories. For outstanding contribution to cost optimization and vendor management, Marcus announced the award goes to Bradley Wilson for his leadership on the Global Tech contract renewal. My heart sank. The Global Tech analysis was my work. Bradley had attended maybe 2 meetings and contributed nothing of substance. Yet there he was striding confidently to the stage as everyone applauded. Marcus handed Bradley a small blue box. When Bradley opened it, I caught the unmistakable gleam of a Rolex watch. "This is a token of our appreciation for saving the company over $10 million through your strategic vendor negotiations," Marcus said, clapping Bradley on the back. Bradley gave a brief speech about team effort and collaborative success without mentioning any specific team members. He returned to his seat amidst congratulations and handshakes from the executives at his table. An hour later, as the ceremony was winding down, Amanda approached me with an envelope. "For your contributions to the team this year," she said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Keep up the good work." Inside was a certificate of appreciation and an $11 voucher for the company cafeteria. $11. Not even enough for a decent lunch in downtown Seattle. I sat there, stunned, the envelope in my hands, watching Bradley show off his new Rolex to admiring colleagues. The watch was worth thousands of dollars, while my contribution to the exact same project earned me enough for a sandwich and maybe a bag of chips. The next morning, I requested a meeting with Amanda. In her office, I tried to maintain my professionalism while addressing the glaring disparity. "Amanda, I'm confused about the recognition for the Global Tech analysis," I began. "That was primarily my work, yet Bradley received credit and a Rolex while I got a lunch voucher." Amanda's expression hardened slightly. "Lupe, you need to understand how these things work. Bradley coordinated with the executive team and managed the relationship aspects. Your analysis was just one component. But the analysis was the basis for the entire negotiation," I countered. Without it, there would have been no savings to celebrate. "Look," she said, leaning forward. "Bradley has a broader role with wider responsibilities. He also has history with the company. The recognition reflects his overall contributions, not just this one project." What she meant, but wouldn't say directly, was that Bradley was the executive VP's son, and that connection trumped actual contribution every time. Over the next few weeks, I noticed more instances of preferential treatment toward Bradley. He was invited to executive lunches and golf outings. His ideas, often recycled from team discussions, were praised in meetings. Meanwhile, my subsequent analyses and recommendations were implemented but attributed to team efforts or occasionally to Bradley's oversight. The inequity became even more apparent when Bradley was assigned to lead a new vendor consolidation project, despite his limited understanding of the process. In the kickoff meeting, he mistakenly referred to our Japanese supplier Honda as a Chinese company and couldn't explain basic terms like volume discount thresholds or service level agreements. After the meeting, Sophia pulled me aside. "You saw that right," she whispered. "The guy doesn't know procurement from purchasing, yet he's leading a $20 million project. Has it always been like this?" I asked her. Sophia nodded. "Since before I joined. His father makes sure he gets the high-profile assignments and the recognition that comes with them. Most of us just accept it and do the work anyway." I found myself cleaning up after Bradley, regularly correcting his errors, in reports clarifying his confused instructions to vendors, and providing him with simplified summaries before meetings so he wouldn't embarrass himself, all while he took credit for the successful outcomes. One particularly frustrating incident occurred when Bradley misunderstood a critical contract clause with our office equipment supplier, Harrington Systems. His error nearly cost the company $300,000 in unnecessary fees. I stayed late for 3 nights straight to renegotiate the terms and fix the mistake. When Amanda congratulated the team on averting the crisis, she specifically mentioned Bradley's quick thinking and leadership. The disparity wasn't just affecting me. I watched as other talented analysts and managers were overlooked for promotions, while less qualified but well-connected employees moved up the ladder. Sophia had been passed over twice for a senior position that eventually went to a former college roommate of an executive. I began keeping detailed notes of these patterns, documenting specific instances of favoritism and credit stealing. It wasn't just about the unfairness to me personally, but about a system that rewarded connections over competence and undermined the company's overall effectiveness. My parents had raised me to believe that hard work and excellence would eventually be recognized. "Cream rises to the top," my father would say. But at Apex, merit seemed to matter far less than who you knew or who you were related to. The lunch voucher incident was just the first clear sign of a deeper problem. Little did I know that the inequality I was experiencing was merely the visible symptom of a much more sinister disease infecting the company at its core. 3 months after the awards ceremony, Amanda assigned me to conduct a comprehensive audit of our top 10 vendor relationships as part of our annual review process. "Your attention to detail makes you perfect for this," she said, dropping a stack of files on my desk. "We need to ensure we're getting the best value from our strategic partnerships." I started with the smaller vendors, methodically working through contracts, invoices, and payment histories. Everything seemed reasonably standard until I reached Global Tech Solutions, our largest technology supplier and the subject of my earlier analysis. The first red flag was the pricing structure. Despite my recommendations and the supposed renegotiation that Bradley had taken credit for, we were still paying 20 to 30% above market rates for most products. In some cases, the prices had actually increased since my initial analysis. The second issue was the payment schedule. Most vendors were paid on standard 30-day terms, but Global Tech received payment within 10 days of invoice submission, an unusually favorable arrangement that cost us valuable float time on millions of dollars. Then came the documentation problems. Several major purchases lacked the required competitive bids or justification forms for sole source selection. Approval signatures were often from the same small group of executives, bypassing the normal procurement channels. I created a spreadsheet tracking these anomalies And as the data grew, a disturbing pattern emerged. The irregularities all increased dramatically around the time Richard Thomas became CEO of Global Tech 3 years ago. Coincidentally, that was the same period during which Marcus Reynolds was promoted to CFO at Apex. My curiosity piqued. I began searching for connections between Marcus and Richard. Nothing appeared in the official vendor relationship documentation, but a bit of research revealed they had attended the same business school and belonged to the same exclusive country club in Bellevue. One evening, while working late, I needed to retrieve a contract amendment from Marcus's office with Amanda's permission. While searching his filing cabinet, I accidentally knocked over a framed photo on his desk. When I picked it up, I recognized Marcus alongside Richard Thomas on what appeared to be a yacht. They were raising champagne glasses with their arms around each other's shoulders, clearly more than casual business acquaintances. The next day, I used my access to the accounts payable system to run a detailed analysis of all payments to Global Tech over the past 3 years. The numbers were staggering. We had paid approximately $357 million more than market rates for equivalent products and services. $357 million of shareholder money and government contract funds, essentially wasted or potentially worse, deliberately misappropriated. But where was this money going? I discreetly reached out to a former colleague who now worked at one of our competitor companies. Without revealing my concerns, I asked about their experiences with Global Tech pricing. Their rates were nearly 40% lower than what we were paying. The pieces were starting to fit together, but I needed more evidence. I noticed that large payments to Global Tech often coincided with Marcus taking personal days off work. Using the company's travel expense system, to which I had legitimate access for vendor analysis, I found that Marcus had submitted expenses for trips to the Cayman Islands 3 times in the past year, each following a major payment to Global Tech. The Cayman Islands, famous for their banking privacy laws and offshore accounts, seemed an unusual vacation choice for someone who otherwise posted photos of family ski trips and European tours on his office wall. I also discovered an unusual consulting agreement buried in the contract appendices. A company called RTM Enterprises received a 2% facilitation fee on all Global Tech sales to Apex. RTM's address was a post office box in the Cayman Islands, and the signatory was listed as RT Manager, Richard Thomas Manager. It seemed too obvious, yet corporate fraud often hinges on such transparent deceptions. The mathematical breakdown was damning. If Global Tech overcharged us by $357 million over 3 years, and RTM received 2% of all sales, that meant approximately $7 million had been directed to this mysterious consulting company. Add in the inflated prices, expedited payments, and suspicious timing, and the picture of a kickback scheme became clear. As I uncovered more evidence, I became increasingly anxious about the implications. This wasn't just unfairness or nepotism. This was potentially criminal fraud on a massive scale. My hands would shake as I logged into the system each morning, afraid of what else I might find, and equally afraid of being discovered. I tried to act normal in meetings, but Amanda began to notice my distraction. "You seem preoccupied lately, Lupe," she commented, after I missed a question during a team update. "Is everything okay with the vendor audit?" "Just a lot of data to process," I replied, forcing a smile. "Some of the historical pricing trends are challenging to analyze." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "Don't go too deep into the historical stuff. We're more concerned with current relationships and future opportunities." Was that a warning? Did she know something? I couldn't tell if her comment was innocent guidance or a subtle attempt to direct me away from the evidence I was uncovering. Bradley, meanwhile, continued his charmed existence, now sporting his Rolex to every meeting and dropping casual references to his upcoming promotion. "Dad thinks I should head up the entire procurement division by next year," he mentioned loudly enough for me to overhear while talking to a colleague. "Really streamline things." The prospect of Bradley overseeing procurement while this massive fraud continued was alarming. If he took over, would the scheme expand? Would the evidence I was gathering be erased or buried? The final confirmation came when I was working late one evening and received an email sent to the wrong address. It was intended for marcus.reynolds@apexmail.com, but was mistakenly sent to marcus.reynolds@apex.com, our regular domain. The email was from Richard Thomas with the subject line, Quarterly Arrangement. The body simply read, Usual transfer complete. Golf this weekend to discuss new percentages. RT. I forwarded the email to my personal account before it could be recalled or deleted, my heart pounding as I realized what I had intercepted. This wasn't just circumstantial evidence anymore. It was direct confirmation of ongoing collusion between our CFO and our largest vendor. That night, I barely slept, wrestling with what to do next. The evidence was compelling, but confronting a CFO with accusations of fraud could end my career if I couldn't prove it conclusively. Worse, if Marcus and Richard had been running this scheme for years, who else at the executive level might be involved? Who could I trust? The next morning, Amanda called me into her office. Her expression was stern as she closed the door behind me. Lupe, I've noticed you spending a lot of time on the global tech account analysis, she said without preamble. I've also been informed that you've been accessing historical payment records and executive travel information. Care to explain why you're looking into areas that aren't relevant to your current assignment? My throat tightened. Someone was monitoring my system access. I'm being thorough, I managed to reply. There are some unusual patterns in the global tech relationship that affect our current pricing structure. Stop looking, she said flatly. That relationship is managed at the executive level and doesn't concern your pay grade. Finish the other 9 vendors and leave global tech alone. Consider this a formal instruction. As I left her office, I saw Bradley watching from across the room, a smug smile on his face as he tapped his Rolex. In that moment, I knew that the corruption went beyond just Marcus and Richard. It was embedded in the company culture, protected by layers of complicity and intimidation. I was now faced with a choice: comply and become part of the system I despised, or find a way to expose the truth no matter the personal cost. The quarterly all-hands meeting was scheduled for the following week in the main auditorium. Attendance was mandatory for all employees, with Marcus Reynolds giving the financial overview and strategic outlook. I sat near the back, my stomach in knots, as I contemplated what I knew versus what would be presented to the company. Marcus took the stage to enthusiastic applause, immaculate as always in a charcoal gray suit with a blue tie that matched the company logo. His confident smile revealed perfect teeth as he began his presentation. I'm pleased to report another successful quarter, he announced, clicking through slides of impressive graphs and numbers. Revenue is up 11% year over year, and our cost control measures have increased profit margins significantly. I gripped my notepad tightly, knowing exactly where those cost control measures were coming from: the manipulation of procurement data and the inflation of vendor payments that funneled money to offshore accounts. Then came the moment that would change everything. I want to highlight our vendor management strategy, Marcus continued, displaying a slide with global tech prominently featured. Thanks to our procurement team and especially the leadership of Bradley Wilson, we've secured unbeatable pricing from our strategic partners, particularly Global Tech Solutions. Unbeatable pricing. The audacity of the lie made my blood boil. We were paying nearly double what our competitors paid for the same products. Just then, Marcus's phone buzzed in his pocket. He paused to check it, his expression shifting almost imperceptibly as he read the message. His eyes darted across the auditorium until they locked with mine. For a brief, terrifying second, I wondered if he somehow knew what I had discovered. He quickly turned to whisper something to James Parker, the company lawyer sitting at the edge of the stage. James's face drained of color, and he immediately began typing frantically on his phone. Marcus cleared his throat and continued, but his rhythm was off. As I was saying, our vendor relationships are excellent, and we anticipate continued success in the coming quarter. Now let's move on to our new product pipeline. During the question and answer portion that followed, I found myself standing up before I had consciously made the decision to do so. My heart pounded in my ears as I waited for the microphone. Lupe Martinez Procurement. I introduced myself when the audio tech reached me. Mr. Reynolds, you mentioned our unbeatable pricing with Global Tech Solutions. Could you explain why we're paying approximately 30% above market rate for comparable products, and why the 2% facilitation fee to RTM enterprises in the Cayman Islands is necessary? The auditorium went silent. Marcus stared at me, his expression a mixture of shock and fury. James Parker was already on his feet, moving toward the microphone setup. That's a very specific question that contains inaccurate information, Marcus replied smoothly, though I could see a vein pulsing in his temple. I'd be happy to address your concerns privately after the meeting. Next question, please. It's not inaccurate, I persisted, even as the audio tech moved to take the microphone away. I have documentation showing we've overpaid by $357 million over 3 years, with suspicious payments coinciding with your trips to the Cayman Islands. James reached the audio station and signaled for the technician to cut my microphone. Marcus forced a laugh that echoed hollowly through the speakers. I think someone in procurement needs to review their analysis methodology. Let's take a 5-minute break, everyone. As the crowd began murmuring and moving about, Amanda appeared at my side, her grip tight on my arm. Conference room C now, she hissed. I was escorted to a small meeting room where Marcus, James, and Bradley were already waiting. Marcus's charming public persona had vanished, replaced by cold fury. What the hell do you think you're doing? He demanded once the door closed. My job, I replied, struggling to keep my voice steady. Identifying financial irregularities and potential fraud. James stepped forward. Those are extremely serious and completely unfounded accusations. The company could sue you for defamation and breach of confidentiality. They're not unfounded, I countered. I have the documentation, the emails, the payment records, and the travel coincidences. I know about Richard Thomas and the kickback scheme through RTM Enterprises. Marcus's face paled slightly, but he recovered quickly. You have nothing but misinterpreted data and conspiracy theories. Bradley, call security and have Miss Martinez escorted to HR. Her employment is being terminated immediately for violating company confidentiality and creating a hostile work environment. Bradley smirked as he picked up the phone. Gladly. Within an hour, I was sitting across from Heather Williams, the Human Resources Director, watching her uncomfortable expression as she pushed termination papers toward me. This is highly unusual, Lupe, she said quietly. Your performance reviews have been exemplary. I'm being terminated because I uncovered fraud, I stated flatly. Not because of any legitimate reason. Heather glanced nervously at the door. I can't comment on your allegations, but I can offer you a generous severance package in exchange for signing a non-disclosure agreement. The document she slid across the desk would prohibit me from discussing anything related to Apex, its executives, or its business practices for life. The generous severance was 3 months' salary, nowhere near enough to compensate for career suicide. I'll need time to consider this, I said, not touching the papers. You have 24 hours, she replied. After that, the offer is withdrawn, and the company will consider legal action for your statements today. I left the building with a security escort carrying a box of personal items and feeling the stares of my colleagues. Sophia caught my eye as I passed her desk, giving me a subtle nod of support. At least someone believed me. The next few days were a blur of anxiety and sleepless nights. Marcus's team moved quickly to discredit me. An email went out to all employees explaining that I had been terminated for serious ethical violations, including misuse of company data and making false accusations against leadership. My professional reputation was being systematically destroyed. Former colleagues stopped returning my calls and messages. LinkedIn connections disappeared as people distanced themselves from the toxic situation. Bradley was promoted to Director of Procurement, taking over many of my former responsibilities, while Amanda gave interviews to industry publications about streamlining the procurement process at Apex. The isolation was devastating. I questioned my worth, my judgment, and even my sanity. Had I misinterpreted everything? Was I throwing away a promising career over a misunderstanding? My lowest point came when I saw a press release announcing a new strategic partnership expansion between Apex and Global Tech, with smiling photos of Marcus and Richard shaking hands at a lavish signing ceremony. Bradley stood prominently in the background, his Rolex visible as he raised a champagne glass in celebration. That night, Sophia called from an unknown number. "Don't give up," she whispered. "You're not crazy and you're not alone. I've seen the same numbers you have. There are others who know something's wrong but are too afraid to speak up." Her call was the lifeline I needed. The next morning, instead of signing the NDA before the deadline, I made a different call. The first step in fighting back against the corruption that had tried to silence me. The office of Bennett Legal occupied the 15th floor of a modest building across town, far from the gleaming Apex headquarters. Rachel Bennett, a former federal prosecutor turned corporate whistleblower attorney, listened intently as I laid out everything I had discovered. Unlike the dismissive executives at Apex, she took detailed notes and asked pointed, intelligent questions. "You've done remarkably thorough work, Lupe," she said after I finished my 3-hour explanation. "Most whistleblowers come to me with suspicions or fragments of evidence. You've built a comprehensive case. Is it enough?" I asked, the knot of anxiety in my stomach tightening. "They're already destroying my reputation." Rachel leaned back in her chair, her expression serious but not discouraging. "Corporate fraud cases are never easy, especially against a company with Apex's resources. But you have several advantages." She outlined our strategy. First, we would file for whistleblower protection under the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, since Apex was a publicly traded company. This would provide some legal shield against retaliation, though the damage to my reputation had already begun. Second, we would compile and secure all evidence I had gathered. Rachel recommended keeping multiple backups in different locations and formats. "They'll claim you stole company information," she warned. "But the courts have consistently protected whistleblowers who take documents solely to expose illegal activity, not for personal gain." Third, and most impactfully, we would file a report with the Securities and Exchange Commission's whistleblower program. If your information leads to successful enforcement action, you could be entitled to 10 to 30% of monetary sanctions over $1 million. I shook my head. "This isn't about money for me." "I understand," Rachel replied, "but financial rewards are an important protection for whistleblowers who risk their careers. Think of it as compensation for the professional damage you'll endure." Over the next 2 weeks, we methodically organized the evidence into a compelling narrative. Every email, spreadsheet, travel record, and payment anomaly was cataloged and cross-referenced. Rachel brought in a forensic accountant who confirmed my analysis of the $357 million overpayment and the suspicious RTM Enterprises connection. "This is textbook fraud," the accountant stated after reviewing the documents. "The pattern is clear and deliberate." Meanwhile, I prepared financially for what would likely be a long period of unemployment. I moved from my downtown apartment to a smaller place in a suburb, cut unnecessary expenses, and applied for temporary jobs that wouldn't require references from Apex. The emotional toll was perhaps the hardest part. I had panic attacks before meetings with Rachel, constantly feared being followed or monitored, and checked my computer for signs of hacking regularly. The weight of going against a powerful corporation with seemingly unlimited resources to fight back was sometimes overwhelming. My parents were concerned but supportive. "You were raised to stand up for what's right," my father reminded me. "No matter the cost." 2 unexpected allies emerged during this difficult period. First, Heather from HR contacted me privately using a personal email account. "I can't be directly involved," she wrote, "but I want you to know that your personnel file has been altered retrospectively. They've inserted negative performance reviews that never existed. I've kept the original safe." The second ally was Philip Anderson, a senior vice president who had been on vacation during the confrontation at the all-hands meeting. He requested to meet at a coffee shop far from Apex offices. "I've had concerns about Marcus for years," he confided, nervously checking over his shoulder periodically. The numbers never quite added up, but the board was so impressed with the profit margins that questions were discouraged. "When I heard what happened with you, it confirmed my suspicions." Philip couldn't offer direct support without risking his position, but he provided valuable insights into the executive structure and decision-making processes that would help our case. A significant breakthrough came when Sophia secretly sent me copies of new global tech contracts, showing even more favorable terms, following my departure and Bradley's promotion. The facilitation fees to RTM Enterprises had increased to 3%. Potentially diverting millions more to offshore accounts. With our evidence organized and our strategy in place, Rachel and I submitted a comprehensive report to the SEC's whistleblower office. The document detailed the fraudulent scheme, the players involved, and the financial impact on shareholders and government contracts. "Now we wait," Rachel said after we filed the report. "These investigations take time, sometimes months, or even years. But we didn't have to wait as long as expected." 3 weeks after our filing, I received a call from Rachel. "The SEC has assigned a team to investigate Apex," she announced. "They're taking it seriously." The news gave me a surge of hope, but I knew the fight was far from over. Marcus and his allies would use every resource at their disposal to discredit the investigation and protect themselves. My next move was perhaps the most difficult, confronting Bradley directly. I arranged to accidentally encounter him at a coffee shop he frequented near Apex headquarters. His shock at seeing me quickly turned to smug confidence. "You've got some nerve showing your face around here," he said, glancing at his Rolex. "Shouldn't you be filing for unemployment?" "I wanted to give you one chance to distance yourself from what's coming," I replied calmly. "The SEC is investigating the global tech relationship. Marcus and Richard will be the primary targets, but anyone complicit will face consequences." His expression faltered momentarily before the arrogance returned. "Nice try. No one's investigating anything. You're just bitter because you couldn't handle the pressure. Your father built a legitimate career," I continued. "Is he aware of what you're involved in? What it could do to his reputation?" That struck a nerve. Bradley's face reddened as he leaned closer. "Stay away from my family and stop spreading lies about Apex. You have no idea who you're messing with." As he stormed out, I noticed his hands were shaking. "Good. Let him worry. Let him wonder what evidence I had and who else might be implicated." The following day, Philip called to inform me that Bradley had requested an urgent meeting with his father and several other executives, not including Marcus or James. The scheme was beginning to fracture from within. By the end of the month, Rachel had helped me prepare for what would likely be a grueling legal battle. I had rehearsed my testimony, anticipated cross-examination questions, and strengthened my emotional resilience. "You're ready," Rachel assured me as we concluded our preparation. "You've done everything possible to expose the truth. Now we need to be patient and let the process work." That night, I slept better than I had in months, knowing that regardless of the outcome, I had fought back strategically and effectively against corruption that had seemed untouchable. The next phase of the battle was about to begin, and this time I was prepared. The first sign that our SEC report had made an impact came 6 weeks later. The Apex stock price suddenly dropped 8% in a single day, following rumors of a regulatory investigation. Financial news sites began reporting that anonymous sources had confirmed SEC interest in the company's vendor relationships and accounting practices. Inside, Apex panic was spreading. Sophia, still my covert informant, described executives rushing between closed-door meetings and IT staff being instructed to secure certain financial documents. "They're shredding papers in Marcus's office," she texted one evening. "And James has been calling an outside law firm non-stop." The SEC moved faster than anyone anticipated. Within 2 months of our report, they had gathered enough preliminary evidence to escalate the investigation. Rachel received notice that federal agents would be serving subpoenas for documents and testimony from key Apex personnel. "This is happening much faster than normal," she explained. "They must have found something significant that corroborated your claims." On a Tuesday morning in April, SEC enforcement officials and FBI agents arrived at Apex headquarters with subpoenas and warrants. The scene described to me later by multiple sources was chaotic. Employees watched in shock as agents secured computer systems and financial records, while executives were escorted to conference rooms for initial questioning. Marcus was reportedly in the middle of a video call with Richard Thomas when agents entered his office. According to Sophia, who had positioned herself near his assistant's desk, his face went completely white as he ended the call abruptly. "Tell Richard not to contact me," he instructed his assistant before being led away by federal agents. James Parker, the company lawyer, attempted to challenge the warrants but quickly backed down when shown the scope of evidence supporting the investigation. Bradley, suddenly finding himself at the center of a federal fraud investigation, reportedly locked himself in a bathroom for nearly an hour before security had to remove the door. That afternoon, the story broke across all major financial news outlets. SEC and FBI raid Apex Technologies amid massive fraud allegations, read the headlines. The company's stock plummeted another 15% before trading was temporarily halted. I watched the coverage from Rachel's office, a surreal feeling washing over me as reporters discussed the very scheme I had uncovered. One business channel brought in a former prosecutor who explained that the rapid escalation suggested credible evidence of serious financial crimes. Within hours, my phone began ringing with calls from journalists seeking comment from the whistleblower. Rachel fielded these requests, protecting my identity while confirming that a former employee had provided initial evidence to authorities. The next day, the full scope of the investigation became public. The SEC was examining approximately $357 million in potentially fraudulent vendor payments offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands and possible kickbacks to senior executives. The numbers matched my analysis exactly. Then came a development we hadn't anticipated. Richard Thomas, CEO of Global Tech, attempted to flee the country on a private jet bound for a non-extradition country. He was detained at the airport by federal agents, his hasty escape attempt only reinforcing the appearance of guilt. With Richard in custody and facing potential criminal charges, the scheme began to unravel rapidly. Marcus Reynolds was placed on administrative leave pending the investigation, and James Parker resigned the following day, citing personal reasons. Apex's board of directors called an emergency meeting and announced the appointment of an interim management team, including Philip Anderson as acting CFO. Their first action was to suspend all contracts with Global Tech and launch an internal investigation parallel to the federal inquiry. A week into the investigation, I received a call from Rachel with stunning news. "Richard Thomas is cooperating with federal prosecutors," she revealed. "He's offering testimony against Marcus in exchange for leniency." The domino effect continued. With Richard talking, Marcus's position became untenable. His lawyer contacted federal prosecutors to discuss a potential cooperation agreement of his own, effectively throwing Richard under the bus in return for reduced charges. As these powerful men turned on each other to save themselves, Bradley Wilson found himself increasingly isolated. His father, the executive VP, had taken an indefinite leave of absence to distance himself from the scandal. Without his protection, Bradley faced the full scrutiny of both federal investigators and the Internal Review Committee. Amanda Nelson, my former supervisor, was among the first to be questioned by investigators. According to Sophia, she emerged from the interview visibly shaken. The next day, she requested a meeting with Philip and the internal investigation team, where she allegedly provided details about her role in suppressing my initial findings and helping to cover up the fraud. 2 weeks into the investigation, Philip reached out to me directly. "The board would like to meet with you," he said, his tone respectful rather than accusatory. "They want to hear your account firsthand." After consulting with Rachel, I agreed to the meeting with specific conditions. My attorney would be present, the conversation would be documented, and there would be no requirement to sign an NDA. The boardroom felt both familiar and foreign as I took my seat across from the directors who now faced potential liability for their lack of oversight. They listened in silence as I methodically outlined the fraud, the evidence I had gathered, and the retaliation I had experienced. When I finished the board chair, a woman named Dorothy Fraser, who had recently been appointed following the previous chair's resignation, spoke first. "Miss Martinez, on behalf of the board and shareholders, I want to express our gratitude for your courage in bringing this matter to light. The damage to the company is significant, but it would have been far worse had this fraud continued." Bradley's downfall came more publicly. During a televised press conference, where Apex was attempting to address the scandal, a reporter asked about nepotism within the company's management structure. The interim CEO gave a diplomatic answer about reviewing all appointments and promotions, but the damage was done. The following day, an internal memo announced Bradley's resignation. Industry blogs published photos of him leaving the building with a cardboard box of personal items, no longer wearing his Rolex. As the federal investigation progressed, the financial impact of the fraud became clearer. Beyond the direct misappropriation of funds, Apex had issued misleading financial statements to investors for years, potentially violating multiple securities laws. Class action lawsuits from shareholders began piling up further, threatening the company's stability. The most dramatic moment came 4 months after the initial raid. Federal prosecutors announced criminal charges against Marcus Reynolds and Richard Thomas for wire fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy. James Parker faced lesser charges related to his role in facilitating and covering up the scheme. All 3 men appeared in court for arraignment, their designer suits replaced by conservative attire meant to convey respectability to the judge. The press coverage was extensive, with my name now publicly linked to the case as the whistleblower who had exposed the fraud. Overnight, I went from being labeled a disgruntled employee to being hailed as a corporate hero who had stood up against corruption at great personal risk. Industry publications that had previously published puff pieces about Apex's innovative vendor management now ran features on the importance of ethical procurement practices and the crucial role of whistleblowers in corporate governance. 7 months after my confrontation at the all-hands meeting, I received an unexpected visitor at my apartment. Amanda Nelson, looking considerably less polished than during her days at Apex, asked if we could talk. After a moment's hesitation, I invited her in. "I owe you an apology," she began, her voice unsteady. "I knew something wasn't right with the global tech relationship, but I convinced myself it wasn't my place to question Marcus or the executives." "You actively worked to silence me," I reminded her. She nodded, eyes downcast. "I was afraid of losing my job, my health care, my retirement plan. It seemed easier to look the other way and follow orders." She paused before adding, "I was wrong." Amanda had negotiated immunity in exchange for her testimony against Marcus and Richard. She would keep her freedom, but had lost her career and reputation in the process. As the criminal cases moved toward trial, the SEC reached a settlement with Apex. The company agreed to pay over $400 million in penalties and restitution, implement comprehensive compliance reforms, and submit to independent monitoring for 5 years. The board, eager to demonstrate their commitment to ethical reform, made another unexpected move. They contacted me through Philip with a job offer to lead a newly created ethics and compliance division with direct reporting access to the board. "We need someone with your integrity and courage," Philip explained. "Someone who has proven they'll stand up for what's right regardless of pressure." After careful consideration and discussions with Rachel, I accepted the position with specific contractual protections for my independence and authority. My return to Apex was covered by the business press as a symbol of the company's commitment to transformation. On my first day back, I walked through the same lobby where I had been escorted out in disgrace months earlier. This time, employees nodded in respect, or stopped, to express their support. Sophia was waiting by the elevator, a wide smile on her face. "Welcome back, Lupe," she said, handing me a small box. Inside was a simple but elegant watch with an inscription on the back, "For true excellence and courage." As I took the elevator to my new office on the executive floor, I reflected on the journey from an $11 voucher to exposing a $357 million fraud. The watch on my wrist wasn't a Rolex, but it represented something far more valuable: integrity that couldn't be bought at any price. 1 year after the fraud was exposed, Apex Technologies was a fundamentally different company. The criminal cases against Marcus, Richard, and James had concluded with guilty pleas and significant prison sentences. Marcus received 8 years for his central role in the scheme, Richard 6 years, and James 3 years plus disbarment. The courts also ordered personal restitution of tens of millions of dollars, though much of the stolen funds remained unrecovered in offshore accounts. Bradley had avoided criminal charges by cooperating with prosecutors, but his professional reputation was destroyed. Last I heard, he was working at his uncle's car dealership in Oregon, the Rolex long gone, replaced by the bitter taste of squandered privilege. My role as head of ethics and compliance gave me a unique opportunity to rebuild the company's internal controls and culture from the ground up. With full board support, I implemented comprehensive reforms: an anonymous reporting system for ethical concerns, mandatory fraud awareness training, robust vendor selection processes, and regular external audits of all major contracts. The procurement team, now led by Sophia following her well-deserved promotion, established clear guidelines that eliminated preferential treatment and ensured decisions were based on objective criteria rather than personal connections. "We call it the Martinez Protocol," Sophia told me with a smile during a review meeting. "Complete transparency in vendor selection and compensation." The change in corporate culture was perhaps the most significant transformation. Employees who had once remained silent about ethical concerns now felt empowered to speak up. Executives who had previously operated with minimal oversight now understood that accountability applied at every level. Dorothy Fraser, who had become the permanent board chair, made ethical leadership a core element of executive compensation. "Financial performance matters," she often said, "but how we achieve those results matters more." On a personal level, the journey had been transformative but challenging. The Whistleblower Award I received from the SEC, $30 million based on the penalties collected, represented financial security I had never imagined. But money couldn't erase the emotional scars of the experience. I still had occasional nightmares about the confrontation and its aftermath. The anxiety that had plagued me during those months of isolation hadn't completely disappeared. Trust came less easily now, even in my new position of authority. Healing began in unexpected ways. A support group for corporate whistleblowers provided a community who truly understood the unique challenges I had faced. Sharing experiences with others who had risked everything for the truth was profoundly validating. Professional therapy helped me process the trauma and rebuild my sense of self-worth. My therapist, Dr. Kimberly Wright, helped me recognize that the doubt and fear I had experienced weren't signs of weakness but normal responses to an abnormal situation. "You demonstrated extraordinary courage," she reminded me during a particularly difficult session. "Now you need to extend that same compassion to yourself that you showed to others by standing up for what's right." Perhaps most healing was the opportunity to mentor younger professionals navigating ethical dilemmas in their own careers. I began speaking at business schools and professional conferences about the importance of ethical decision-making and the real cost of remaining silent in the face of wrongdoing. After one such presentation, a young woman approached me with tears in her eyes. "I'm facing something similar at my company," she confessed. "I was ready to quit rather than speak up. But your story gave me courage." I gave her my contact information and later connected her with Rachel, who helped her document and report financial irregularities at her firm. Unlike my experience, her company's leadership took the concerns seriously, addressed the issues, and eventually promoted her for her integrity. Not all stories ended so positively. For every company that embraced ethical reform, others continued to operate in the shadows, punishing those who dared to question powerful executives or established practices. The system remained flawed, but each whistleblower who came forward helped shine light on those flaws and push for meaningful change. My parents attended the ceremony when I received a prestigious Ethics in Business award from a national organization. My father, who had always taught me to stand up for what was right, wiped tears from his eyes as I acknowledged their influence in my acceptance speech. They raised me to believe that integrity isn't just a word but a way of life, I told the audience. That lesson proved more valuable than any business degree or executive training program. 2 years after returning to Apex, I faced a difficult decision when a larger technology firm offered me a position leading their global ethics program at twice my current salary. The opportunity was tempting, but I realized my work at Apex wasn't finished. The reforms were still taking root, and my departure might signal that the commitment to ethical transformation was merely temporary. I declined the offer and recommitted to building Apex into a model of corporate integrity. Dorothy and the board responded by expanding my department's resources and authority, making Apex a leader in corporate governance practices. The $11 voucher that had once symbolized such profound inequity was now framed on my office wall beside the newspaper headlines, announcing the fraud investigation. Together, they told a story of transformation, both personal and organizational, that continued to inform my decisions every day. The journey from procurement analyst to whistleblower to ethics officer had been neither linear nor easy. There had been moments of crushing doubt, profound fear, and overwhelming isolation. But there had also been courage, vindication, and ultimately the deep satisfaction of knowing that I had remained true to my values when it mattered most. In the end, the most valuable lesson wasn't about corporate fraud or regulatory compliance. It was about the power of a single person to effect change, even against seemingly insurmountable opposition. It was about finding strength in vulnerability and purpose in adversity. The company that had once valued Bradley's connections over my competence now pointed to my story as a cornerstone of their reformed culture. The executives who had dismissed my concerns now faced the consequences of their arrogance, and the system that had seemed so impenetrably corrupt had proven susceptible to the persistence of one person unwilling to accept injustice. As I mentored the next generation of business leaders, I emphasized that ethical choices rarely come with immediate rewards. Often they come with significant personal cost. But the alternative, the slow erosion of integrity that comes from accepting small injustices until they become normalized, is far more costly to both individuals and society. What would you do if faced with a similar situation in your workplace? Would you have the courage to speak up when something isn't right? Even if it means risking your job, your reputation, or your financial security. I hope my story has given you something to think about. If you found value in this experience, please like this video, subscribe to hear more stories of courage and integrity, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Remember, sometimes the most important thing we can do is simply refuse to be silent when we witness injustice. Thank you for listening to my journey.